Hello there, my name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. Hey, you, get off them. I've got no rhythm. And today I'm going to do some things. Friday reads and... Oh, I'm back in Israel. As last time we spoke, I was in the States. I came back to Israel. My wife sadly didn't. She tested positive, had to stay there in quarantine. I decided to come home anyway so I could do my quarantine here and do some work. So I left her behind. My in-laws also both tested positive. I think the wedding that we went to was really super spreader event. So everyone got sick except me because I already had COVID. So left her behind. It was the only thing to do. I gave her all the cash I had in my pocket and a warm blanket, and she should be fine until she's staying with our friends in Connecticut. If anyone's worried, my in-laws are staying with people in New Jersey. Everyone is well. No one's too sick. My wife had pretty sort of flu-y symptoms for a couple of days and was miserable and blocked up while I was there. And then already when I was leaving, she was already feeling a bit better. And I spoke to her. She's been working this week. She's great. She's only had to do 5 days in quarantine with COVID, so she's now allowed to go out with a mask on, but she's fine. And she may actually get more of a rest there than being back here with me. So I'm in quarantine here, but Israel has just taken America off the red list as of midnight tonight. So I think as of midnight tonight, I'm no longer in quarantine. I was supposed to do a second test on Sunday to get out of quarantine, but I think it's Thursday night tonight, recording this going up Friday. I think as of midnight tonight, I'm double checking, getting texts all the time from people. I think that as of midnight tonight, I'm out of quarantine because I tested negative when I landed as well. Anyway, that's enough about that. Last thing I did before I left Westport, we were staying with friends we were staying with, whose apartment we were staying in New York, and then we stayed with them in their house in Westport, Connecticut. And she volunteers at a local secondhand bookshop, which is attached to the library, and we went to visit that on my last day in America. So this is that bookshop. And I bought 3 things while I was there. One second. One of them was so they're all great. So the first one is a graphic novel. Bad Night is number 4 in the criminal series by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, and I've got the first 3, so this was the one that I needed next, and I've been looking for it. I was trying to buy it online and managed to pick up there for $6. Then I got this is Something New Under the Sun by Alexandra Kleeman, which is a brand new novel which I paid $6 for, new price $28, so whatever, because I think it's a bit torn. I don't know if this is a remain. I don't know how they had this copy. It was brand new in the bookshops, and I didn't buy it. I read Alexandra Kleeman's last novel, You Too Can Have a Body Like Mine, which was sort of weird and quirky, and I liked it, but it was a bit too experimental and wasn't mad about it, and so I hadn't picked this up, and I bought it for $6. I decided to give me another chance to read this author, and I'm quite looking forward to that. So that's that. And then the last book I picked was an absolute delight. I've got Salesman in Beijing by Arthur Miller, which they sold me for $2, and I think it might even be the original hardback, first published in the 80s. Is this 1984? So this is Arthur Miller's diaries from when he was invited to go to Beijing and direct a translated version of his play, Death of a Salesman. And I used this. I studied Arthur Miller in school and did my A-levels and studied Death of a Salesman for my A-levels. And then I studied him at university. I did my undergraduate thesis on Arthur Miller. And so I had referenced this book. They had this in the library, and I had referenced this book. I don't think I ever read it cover to cover. So to have my own copy, and my memory of it never had the dust cover, this library version that I had. So to have my own copy with a beautiful dust cover, picked up for $2, I'm actually really looking forward to reading this because this made an impression on me, and I'll talk about it when I get round to reading it. But big fan of Arthur Miller. I got to shake his hand once because he was appearing in London, gave a talk, and I queued up afterwards and shook his hand, and he signed a postcard for me. Anyway, love Arthur Miller. Happy to have a copy of Salesman in Beijing, and looking forward to actually reading it cover to cover instead of just dipping in and quoting from it. So that's that. I also did, everyone's been doing their top 10s of the years. I don't really do I just don't think in those terms. I don't get organized enough to do it. But I decided to go through all my reading, all the books that I had listed in Goodreads, and there were 148 books in 2021, of which a lot of them, I think a third of those are sort of graphic novels. I don't think my page per book was as high as it's been in previous years, but 148 books to have got through, to have brought in 100 plus books in the year and read 148 books and be able to shelve them. That's the goal. And my if I have any reading goals for 2022, it will be to read stuff on from my TBR and actually read books and maybe read more novels and not rather than graphic novels and thrillers and stuff, to actually because I like them and but I always mix it up a little bit. So maybe I'll try and read more of that. But I really want to get through my TBR. But I thought I jotted down the books that I put in Goodreads, the ones that I gave the highest stars to, because Goodreads may give stars even though I don't really. Anyway, so I made a list of some of those that I think. So this is 10 books that I read in 2021, which I think really fantastic. So do with this as you will. And I've spoken about all of these, and I'm not going to speak about much about them. If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin was just a delight. Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, loved that. Inside Story by Martin Amis. I know I'm not going to convince anyone to read it, but it really was outstanding. Whereabouts by Jhumpa Lahiri, really loved that. A Swim in the Pond in the Rain, George Saunders. I read in one volume Cranford and Cousin Phyllis by Elizabeth Gaskell. I think I liked Cousin Phyllis even more than Cranford, but I thought they were both tremendous. Crossroads by Jonathan Franzen. Again, I'm not going to convince anyone, but it's a first-class novel. I read Hamlet by Maggie O'Farrell. First time, my first Maggie O'Farrell, and I read it this year, and I think most people read it before then, but it was just really wonderful. And as a parent, it was heartbreaking and just tremendous piece of work. Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe was, I think, probably my favourite bit of non-fiction of the year. And Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw, which I had never read. Love My Fair Lady, and reading that play was just delightful. So those are 10 books that I read this year that I had amazing experiences with. Okay, so let's go through my reading since we last spoke. So the last book that I read in 2021. So I was talking about was this is the fourth in the Longmire series. Craig Johnson. This is called Another Man's Moccasins, and I think this was different again than the first three. And I quite like these. I'll keep dipping into them. They're not. I don't think it's an essential series, and some people find it a little cozy, but I think they're quite hard boiled. And this one had loads of Vietnam flashbacks, which I'm not sure the other ones did, but just meaty enough and interesting and different enough to the other crime fiction that I read, because it's just a different setting and it's kind of unusual. And I like this. That was Another Man's Moccasins by Craig Johnson. That was the last book. I was at book 148 from 2021. So now starting the books I've read in 2022 this week. So the first one I read was a graphic novel. This is Fagin the Jew by Will Eisner. This is one of later work in his career. And this is a kind of graphic retelling of the story of Fagin from Oliver Twist. So he said at the beginning this is not going to be a graphic retelling of Oliver Twist. It does kind of become a graphic retelling of Oliver Twist towards the end, but it also tries to humanize the character of Fagin, who he says has been used as a reference point for anti-Semitism. Fagin, whether he's on the fence about whether Dickens' portrayal of Fagin is anti-Semitic, but the reference point of Fagin as the Jew, the thief, the greedy, the hunched, someone who surrounds himself with young boys. There's lots of sort of nasty, negative stereotypes that he thinks have been piled onto the character of Fagin, and he tries to not rehabilitate, but humanize the idea of Fagin as a young man, and actually tells a story about Jews in London in Victorian times, and how the Ashkenaz Jews that came over from Eastern Europe were lower on the economic scale than the Sephardi Jews who'd been there for a while and had risen up and assimilated, Benjamin Disraeli as an example, the Disraelis who converted, and in order to move up through society, so even though they converted to Christianity, they were still identified as Jews, but that Sephardi community had worked harder at becoming more British and more upwardly mobile, whereas the Ashkenazi Jews, so he puts Fagin as a child of Ashkenazi Jews who were poor and uneducated and having to make ends meet any way they could, which is not a great excuse for a life of crime, but it's a valiant attempt. It's interesting. The book, and then the book in the second half does exactly the thing he said he wasn't going to do, which was do a retelling of Oliver Twist. You can't beat, for my money, you can't beat Eisner's pencil work. It's just exquisite, and he was doing graphic storytelling before anyone else thought that there was any stories to be told other than aliens flying through the air and shooting laser beams out of their eyes. So I add to my collection of Eisner graphic novels as and when I can pick them up, and eventually I'd like to have them all. Less a fan of his work on the spirit, which I guess was, where he had the base on which he could do all these kind of things, but his work in defining graphic storytelling and then some of these more interesting standalone books I find, and I try and pick them up whenever I can. So that was Fagin the Jew by Will Eisner. Then I read, so my first big book of the year was a biography, and this is Sometimes You Have to Lie by Leslie Brodie, the life and times of Louise Fitzhugh, renegade author of Harriet the Spy. And this is something I heard about for the first time on BookTube before I joined BookTube. So I would say November 2020, I think this came out around then. And of course, it was Steve Donoghue who mentioned it and spoke very highly. I was delighted that he spoke very highly of it as a biography. So I waited and I picked it up secondhand this year and had it waiting for me in New York when I got there. It's a terrifically breezy read. Louise Fitzhugh, if you don't know Harriet the Spy, there's no reason why this should mean anything to you, but Harriet the Spy was a very important book for me growing up. I have my copy of Harriet the Spy. This is the copy that I read, and this is the copy that I read when I was about 9-10 years old. That's Harriet the Spy in Armada paperback, and I'm loath to open it up now because the pages are likely to fall out, but this is the actual copy that I read, and that is the character of Harriet that we see on the cover, tomboyish, wearing a black hoodie, jeans, exactly as she described in the book, with her torch hanging off her belt and her canteen there, and her notebook, of course. It's I don't want to explain the story of Harriet the Spy if you don't know Harriet the Spy, but Harriet is, as I say, this tomboyish character. Tomboy is the word most usually applied to Harriet, and she has a friend, Janie, who wants to be a scientist, and another friend, Sport, who's a boy who lives with a single father and cooks and cleans for him. It was clear to me, even 8, 9, 10 years old, that there was something unusual going on with gender in this book and the expectations placed upon gender. And the story of Louise Fitzhugh, who was the author, is of a young woman who grew up in the South, troubled childhood. Her father won custody of her in a bitter divorce battle and told her that her mother had died, even though her mother had fought for her and wanted to see her. Grew up a very sort of spoiled, privileged white childhood in the South. And even as a young developing mind became aware of the inequalities of what it was like living in the Jim Crow South in the 40s and 50s, and want to leave and would not stay in Mississippi. And then when eventually she got out and came to New York, and her whole life would not return. And when she died at a tragically young age of 46, she had made it clear that she would not be buried in the South. She was wide awake and a very brilliant mind, starting a career as a painter and illustrator, and then somehow ended up writing this book, Harriet the Spy. She, I think, after when she finally left the South, there was a marriage which was never consummated and which her father managed to get annulled. But after that, she leaves the South and she makes it very clear that she's never going to wear women's clothing again, and lived the rest of her life as an out and proud lesbian in New York at a time where it wasn't done to be out and proud about your sexuality or your homosexuality. And this book does a fantastic job of describing her life and how proud she was, and the women she loved, and the relationship she had at a time where, as I say, this was not, many of the women she was in relationships with were not open about their lives. As she became a published author, and as Harriet the Spy became an instant success, this was not something that was spoken about, even though, to me, I read this book in the, must be 1980, around then, late 70s, early 80s. To me, with no understanding of gender identity, there was something odd going on here. It must have been clear. The book's published, Harriet the Spy, published in 1964. The gay subtext seems to me so apparent. The idea that sometimes you have to lie, but to your own self you must always be true, which is the lesson that she receives from her nanny, Old Golly, is about, I think, concealing one's identity and telling lies in order to smooth life over, because sometimes that's the best thing, but always know yourself and always be true to yourself. So she wrote a sequel to Harriet the Spy, which I eventually chased down. This is The Long Secret. I bought this in a half-price books in Texas, I believe, until 2001, early 2001. And I don't recommend, as an adult male, trawling the children's book section of any bookstore in Texas, but somehow I managed to get hold of a copy of The Long Secret, which is lesser work than Harriet the Spy, but subversive in its own way, with its depiction of young girls' first period and how that's addressed, and ways that this was not something that children's literature had ever seen at the time. So that's The Long Secret, a lesser work. There's another book which I don't have, because when I read it, again, would have been the early 80s after I read Harriet the Spy, I read a library edition. I've never gone out and replaced it or bought a copy. And that was a book that she wrote, which was published posthumously. It was finished and published the week after Louise Fitzhugh died, and it was called Nobody's Family is Going to Change. I can understand that today, in the mid 21st century, it's not necessarily going to be a super popular work, because Harriet the Spy, a white woman from the South, wrote a whole book about an African American family. But again, if I can tell you a little bit about the plot of Nobody's Family is Going to Change, because it also had a huge impact on me. They're a middle class, upwardly mobile African American family living on the Upper East Side, which I think is where Louise Fitzhugh had lived. And the father is a successful lawyer, but aware of how hard he's had to work to get where he is, and he has a daughter who we know as Emma, short for Emancipation, and the daughter desperately wants to be a lawyer like her father, and the son, she has a younger brother who only wants to be a dancer, and the father is adamant about the roles that these children must fit into, which is not lawyer for a daughter and not dancer for his son. And the struggles between the children and the parents, and the idea of gender roles and gender identity had a massive impact on me without me really understanding what these things were. I knew there was children struggling against the fixed ideas that parents had, something that I think all children can relate to, but specifically over gender roles and who we could be in life, and what boys can be and what girls can be, I think had a big impression on me. All of this is covered in this fantastically warm and readable biography, which I highly recommend if you have any love for Harriet the Spy. I'm not sure this would mean much to people who don't love Harriet the Spy. And there's apart from the three books that I mentioned, there was another sequel to Harriet the Spy called Sport, which was coupled together from work she left over, and I haven't read that. So basically, we're talking about three books. This is, by any other definition, an author who did not produce much, but in Harriet the Spy, to my mind, produced one of the great works alongside its immediate predecessor, To Kill a Mockingbird, and any other great work of literature for children. I think the book frames as great works of literature for young girls. I wasn't a young girl, but I still live by the rules of Harriet M. Welsch, and her wisdom and silliness guide me to this day. Sometimes You Have to Lie by Louise Fitzhugh. Love that. Love Harriet the Spy. Louise Fitzhugh, fascinating character if you want to know more. And then after that, I started reading one, and then I ended up reading all three, the last three volumes of this Batman run that I somehow managed to collect in hardback without paying full hardback prices. So this is volume 8 of Scott Snyder's run on Batman. This is before the Rebirth, so this is early 20-teens, and volume 8 super heavy. So there's been the last volume we saw, there was Joker, Endgame, and big, I'm not going to do any spoilers, but big things happen at the end of that. So in this volume we have the costume of Batman, and this giant sort of bat robot. We don't see it there, it's got big bunny ears. There's a picture there. That's a better picture of the robot with the bat ears, which is the new Batman costume inhabited by Commissioner James Gordon, because Batman is not on the scene. And this was quite good. I've been this whole series. There are 10 volumes in all. They started strong with a whole Court of Owls, and then there was a lull, and the finish is strong to my mind. So these got super heavy, but then this volume finished on a cliffhanger. So this is issues 41 to 45 of that Batman series, and it finished on cliffhanger. So I went immediately after I finished that. I thought I'm going to read another one, and volume 9 of this was Bloom, which is the second part of this. There's a new Batman villain called Mr. Bloom, and Commissioner Gordon, James Gordon, is in this Batman robot trying to fight Bloom, and then this is about how Batman comes back. Spoiler. They always come back. So then I'd read those two, and I thought, well, I might as well finish the series, get over with, because this is volume 10, this is epilogue, and this is kind of what happens at the end of this. And then after all this, there was Batman Rebirth. So that I've got a complete run now in hardback of this Scott Snyder series, about 50, 60 issues with occasional issues from other series just to fill out the gaps. And I don't know why I did this, but some of it was okay. So that's the end of that, and now I can put those aside. So I read all those. So that was books 3, 4, and 5 of 2022, and then I've started this, which is Several People Are Typing by Calvin Kasulki, which is a whole book written in Slack messages, and we find out very early on that our hero Gerald has done something on his computer and has been uploaded to Slack. And he's leaving messages and being involved in text conversations with people, and they're saying, well, just sign off ill from work. He goes, no, I'm in this program and I don't know how to get out. And I guess we're going to find out. And it might be a little bit millennial, but it's on it's in the finals of the tournament of books for this year. So I'm going to get it done, because there'll be plenty of opportunity to talk about it when the tournament of books kicks off in March. I think it's going to be a lesser work and may get knocked out in the first round, but it's another book I can cross it off that list, and maybe fun. I'm only like 5 pages in, and I'll get through that this weekend because there's no one else around this weekend. It's just me and my books. I think my wife is not coming home. I just spoke to her. She's in Connecticut, but I think my daughter is coming home tonight. So I think it'll just be me and her this weekend. So that'll be fun, and that's all I have to say. Wow, 20 minutes. I've done pretty well. I speak too fast, but I'm trying. Another one of my resolutions is to do these shorter than I've done them previously. So that's all you're getting. Bye.